We're really excited to invite you today to our next newsroom visit in a series of newsroom visits that we've been hosting at the International Press Institute. I'm Ryan, the head of media business and innovation at the International Press Institute. And I'll really just start by giving a quick introduction to IPI, to our innovation department, and then hand it over to today's partner on our newsroom visit. So for those of you who do not know, IPI is a global network of editors, journalists, and publishers committed to press freedom and independent journalism. Our press freedom team really focuses on monitoring and evaluating and reporting on threats to journalists, while our independent journalism support work really seeks to provide solutions to some of the pressing challenges facing the industry. The IPI's media innovation team was founded 3 years ago and designs and delivers programs that support innovation and experimentation in independent media organizations facing a variety of challenges that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, up to and including things like audience fragmentation, low willingness to pay, high production costs of things like investigative journalism, the competition of high quality content and journalism with viral misinformation, shortages in revenue, and over-reliance on big tech, and much more. We really aim to provide in this work the infrastructure for experimentation and strategy to future-proof your media. This includes funding, training, advisory support, but also community building and designing peer-to-peer networks, which is what we're here to really work on today. Our series of newsroom visits, which we've now been doing for a few years, have taken us in the past to newsrooms in India, Lebanon, South Africa, El Salvador, Pakistan, Norway, and beyond. And here we are really creating a space for independent media to tell their story to an audience of media builders across the world. The goal here is to really bring you an inside look into how your peer media around different places in the world are managing things like operations, strategizing for growth, mitigating risks and political issues, navigating new forms of technology and audience engagement. So without further ado, today we are visiting Vlast. Vlast is an independent analytical online magazine that covers politics, economics, and social issues. They were founded in 2012, and they really publish news, reportage, analyses, investigations, long reads, expert opinion in 3 languages, Kazakh, Russian, and English. And they're also very active in global investigative journalism networks, which they will tell you a lot more about, but these include ICIJ, OCCRP, and more. Today we'll be hearing from 3 of their team members, Vyacheslav Abramov, the founder and CEO, Vladislav Son, their publisher, and Paolo Sobello, their editor. After about 45 minutes of their presentation, we'll then moderate a question and answer. The presentation will be recorded, so you can also view this afterwards on our website. But if you have any questions, you can certainly add them in the question and answer box. And before I hand over, I just want to thank IPI's innovation team, including Dinara, Nikki, and Alina for helping support this session today. So yeah, Vladislav, great to have you, and I would love to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and thanks to International Press Institute, for giving us this opportunity to tell our story, the story of Vlast and overall, media landscape and political context, in Kazakhstan. Here's my colleague Paolo Sorbello. He is our editor, as you said, and we also have Slava Abramov, our CEO, to join this meeting. So 3 of us, as Ryan said, are going to be presenting today. So let me first start to launch our presentation. So yeah, this is our team, our newsroom. We have like a lot of bright journalists and bright editors who are working on our publications. And first, in this presentation, I wanted to start, to tell you a brief history about, media landscape and political context in Kazakhstan. And To start telling you the story, we wanted just to state a simple fact about Kazakhstan. So, according to Freedom of Speech Index by Reporters Without Borders, Kazakhstan is ranked 142nd out of the 180 countries, and this number and ranking can actually tell you a lot about the freedom of speech in Kazakhstan and how, media and journalists, feel here. But what is the story behind this ranking is actually this one. So probably many of you know that Nursultan Nazarbayev was the president of Kazakhstan, and he ruled the country, for 3 decades. And during this time, he has built an autocracy that has only served the interest of political and business elites. And in 1997, Kazakhstan introduced this repressive law on media, and the media landscape, got cleared out of independent TV and radio broadcasting, newspaper, and other media outlets. And the state started to exercise, total control over information. So media companies were acquired either by the government or oligarchs, affiliated with it. In March 2019, we have observed a kind of a transition of power when Nursultan Nazarbayev, officially stepped down and handed the presidency, to Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, the current president of Kazakhstan. But this transition is, taken in kind of marks because, even though he handed the presidency, he still remained, as a main figure in power until, January events in 2022. So January events were, unprecedented protests against the government that was triggered by a sudden increase in gas prices, and were, met with a harsh, repression. So security forces killed at least, 238 people and wounded, thousands of them. So this changed the political context. Tokayev gained the real power, and while Nazarbayev was kind of sidelined. But despite this change at the top, the nature of our political context and the media landscape didn't change much. And the hostility, the censorship, and control towards the independent media, remained until today. And I wanted to illustrate you with this little graphic how what is the difference in scope between the propaganda and independent media narratives. As you can see, if you compare these two things, you will see that the propaganda machine works much in a bigger scope, and they have under its influence a lot of media outlets that work in different forms. It's TV broadcasts, it's radio, it's magazines, it's newspaper, digital media. They have a lot of bloggers and influencers in social media. We also have like a network of anonymous Telegram channels who are producing a lot of narratives that are that are serving the interest of the state or the business elites and other influential figures. And we also have kind of a new dimension of independent media, those who kind of try to present themselves as independent media, but they actually serve the interests of the powerful. And if you look at this graph, you also see there is this volume of independent media who have much less resources that they can have at their hands. And you see because of this difference in scope, there is like an unfair competition going on between the state affiliated media, the media that owned by oligarchs, and independent media, very few in Kazakhstan. So there are only operate either online or in social media. And as I said, the number of it is very low. So there is also like a competition, like in terms of funding, right? We have in Kazakhstan, we have what we call like state informational order, which is basically the government subsidies who is kind of exposing those funding to media outlets, and who are using this to tell this propaganda narratives. And of course, independent media don't never take them because they don't want to be influenced by the state. So considering this, this graph as I'm showing you today, you could understand actually that Kazakhstan has a very few independent media outlets, because it's very difficult to do, independent reporting here. We have a lot of things, going on in terms of, taking a new legislation on mass media, which is also, much more repressive than the old one. And there is a lot of restrictions that don't allow us, to do, to do reporting in a way that would allow us, to feel safe and secure. And also, because this, like, the government and the state overall invest a lot of money into this propaganda. The funding that goes to this kind of market actually exceeds the volume of the advertising market overall. So this causes the distortion of the media landscape, and it doesn't increase the quality of the content, because for the media organization it's just easier to take money and don't think about whether it's going to be interesting or high quality. They don't have to compete for for the bigger audience, because they can invest funding into bigger campaigns and promoting themselves in research engine systems and so on. So as you can see, it is for independent media, it is a challenge. It is a challenge to compete, for funding. It is a challenge to compete for the bigger audience, and it is also a challenge, to promote the narratives that were independently, produced, within the newsrooms. So this is a very short and brief history of political context and media landscape, just to give you kind of few puzzles and understanding of what's going on in Kazakhstan. And having this context, I would like to give the word to Slava Abramov, to our CEO, who is going to tell you about why Vlast, was created and what was the idea behind it. Slava, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really depressing to do a journalism in Kazakhstan, you can imagine. And many of you know how depressing it is to do a journalism in autocratic countries. But at the same time, it's a lot of hope when you are doing a journalism in autocratic country, because you understand why you're doing this, and you understand with whom you are doing this and for whom. It's very important questions that all the journalists are asking themselves, I do believe, all the time, and we are asking them too. And we did when I want to say we, but I'm the founder of Vlast, but I was not alone. I was with a group of my friends who helped me to do that, and we thought about what to do, how to navigate all the changes and all the struggles that we have in journalism, and the idea to do a journalism in Kazakhstan. And that's why we established Vlast 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago. And it was the kind of not the end, but like the peak of Nazarbayev era. And it was the darkest time of his presidency, when it was very clear that all independent media are killed, like literally closed or like shut it down different ways, in Kazakhstan. And we have only one truly independent media in the country, RFRL, which is not Kazakh media, which is American media working in Kazakhstan and doing a good job still, But we wanted to do something local. We wanted to do something for Kazakh audience, and we wanted to do something the way that we understand the journalism. That's why we established Vlast. We had also a very stupid idea to do media as a business in Kazakhstan. And it was extremely, extremely naive. And we understood that very, very fast because we struggled a lot with not only because we were new, but because many of the companies, many of the businesses immediately responded to our request to work with us with the idea that we are. They called it not independent media, but oppositional media. They call all independent media in Kazakhstan still oppositional media, and we struggled a lot with advertisers. We struggled a lot with experts who didn't really wanted to be featured in our stories and stuff like that. But we had a very different periods in our work. We've tried to work with different kind of businesses and corporations, and sometimes even with state companies. We did some really interesting commercial projects, and we did a lot of stuff that allowed us to work for 12 plus years. Before pandemic, we had some very big successes in as a like as a business also, because we opened what we called offline department of Vlast. We organized a bunch of different events, including some events with big companies. We organized a huge journalism festival in Almaty, and it was very successful. And then pandemic changed everything. And after pandemic, we heavily dependent on funding from donors. And Vlad already told you that it's a struggle to find funding for independent media in Kazakhstan, and I do believe it's familiar for many of you around the world who are doing the same thing that we are doing here in Kazakhstan. So we are heavily dependent on that. We are trying our best to do different forms, including everything that every media around the world experienced: donations, subscriptions, different models, work with advertisers, commercial forms of work. We are lucky because we have a very small but very efficient and professional team of 18 based here in Kazakhstan. We did not leave the country, and we want to stay as long as we can and to work as long as we can and do what we love to do. We do a lot of social reporting. We do a lot of investigative reporting. We do a lot of what we call big stories to provide a bigger picture of what's going on in Kazakhstan and in Central Asia, because it's very not similar but very close, like situation in all countries in this region. So this is what we're trying to do right now, and we are doing it with pretty much same goal that we had 12 and a half, 13 years ago when we decided to open Vlast. We wanted to do a journalism, and we wanted to do it independently. And we are lucky because we still can do it. And it's only because of the people and because of support from different sites. And we are very thankful to you to have this tour and to have us here, because we truly believe that it's really important to be visible. This is something that helped us to survive through all these years. That's why we are participating in so many different, associations and organizations around the world, because we do believe that when you are small and independent media, local one working on country level, you can survive only if you are protected by your colleagues around the world. This is our strategy. This was our strategy for many years, and it is still our strategy right now, because we do believe that even I'm calling ourselves a small media, we are not that small. We have a big audience. We have millions of viewers and readers every single month. But at the same time, we are working in a small country with only 20 million people. But we are protected by all the colleagues that are standing behind us, and it's still very important for us. I do believe that it's the third topic, right, Vlad, that will Paolo cover.
Yeah, there is also, we wanted to kind of show you what is the formation, of our current team. And we, as Slava said, we are 16 people in our newsroom. And here they are, presented, their names and what they're doing in our newsroom. We have Slava as a founder and CEO, who is managing the organization overall, and he's also leading our investigation projects. We have Svetlana Romashkina, who is our editor-in-chief and who is kind of overseeing overall operations of our newsrooms, starting from the news and ending with with the long formats, long stories. I work as a publisher. I'm responsible for many different organizational questions, and I'm also doing project management. We have Kazakh language editor who is working on content in Kazakh, and we are trying to develop this this editorial, and produce as many articles as possible. But still, we have a lot of room, to improve in this area. We have Irina Gumurkina, who is our senior editor and who is also responsible for the news stories, for the long stories as well. We have Dmitry Mazarenko, who is producing and editing a lot of stories on social injustices and inequalities and so on. And Paolo Sorbello, also our English language editor, who is also developing our English editorial and writing a lot of stories on social issues as well, and social economic issues, inequalities, what's going on in our energy sector as well, and covering many other issues, related to this range. We have Tamara Val, who is our, bureau chief in Astana, and Almaz Kaysar, Nazirke Kurmangazinova, Beimbet Moldagali, Yuna Korostilova, Gutaus Bigbai. This our, bright young reporters who are very passionate about the topics that they write about. They're especially passionate about the stories related to people who are not presented, in mainstream media. They always seek, to tell, the stories of those whose voices are not heard, and their stories are always very impactful, and they try to present the real picture to our readers of what's going on socially in Kazakhstan. And we have also great photojournalist Danyar Musirov, who is helping us to illustrate our stories with great pictures. And I just wanted to show you briefly our structure. This is very simple, and very concise structure. So we have Slava, who is overseeing overall operations. We have editor-in-chief and publisher, who is also trying to kind of share responsibilities and organize and coordinate our editorial processes. We have editors who are responsible, for different topics, for different forms of the stories, and we have reporters and journalists who are doing the field work, who are talking to people, to sources, and so on. So we have a very simple structure, as we are like a small media in scope and in terms of the number of people working there. Our operations, can be complicated because journalism itself is not an easy job to do. So we sometimes, our responsibilities can coincide. We can do a lot of things at the time. So there is no kind of defined areas that we are responsible for. So it depends on the situation, that we are in, and based on the situation, we decide, what we are doing, editorial wise. So the next one is business model is also very simple. I would just tell you briefly that, as Slava said before, we are now, heavily relying on the international donor support, and we are trying to improve the situation, doing more commercial projects and advertising. But, given the context of media landscape that I presented to you before, it's not easy thing to do, and still grants take, substantial part of our budget. And we also have a readers revenue. We are taking donations from our core readers, who read us daily. They follow us in social media, and they also subscribe our newsletters. So those are the readers who really appreciate our work, and they donate to us either regularly or giving us one-time donations. So next, I'm going to give the floor to Paolo, who is going to tell you why it is important to have, access to independent reporting from Kazakhstan and Central Asia.
Thank you, Vlad, and thank you to IPI. I also wanted to start maybe from saying that I was a reader and a subscriber to Vlast before they hired me 2 years ago. And I think it's important that we have now a kind of a naturally multilingual newsroom. It's quite interesting when we do the newsroom meetings that it's trilingual. But the reason that it's important is that we need to speak to the people that care about Kazakhstan. And we found that the people that care about Kazakhstan, not just Kazakh speaking, not just Kazakhs and Russian speaking Kazakhs, or the Russian speaking world, but also the international arena, because in general, we see that there's a lack of truly well-researched and ethically sourced journalism in Kazakhstan in general. And because there's this so-called competition between Russia, China, and the West, everybody else talks about Kazakhstan, and we from Kazakhstan, we don't, right? So we don't have, there's no voice of Kazakhstan in the international media, as we argue there should be. And so the idea was to try to establish to translate our articles into several languages, and to have an understanding that a lot of the important topics that we cover at Vlast should be read more broadly, also in the English speaking world, that of course we imagine being the global media arena. Obviously, geographically, as Vlad is trying to show us with this map, we are locked between Russia and China, who are definitely not champions of democracy, and we can say actually that the heritage of the Soviet Union in Kazakhstan is still pretty strong, and that's why the main language still of Vlast remains Russian. But at the same time, this has been changing, both with the kind of maturity that the population in Kazakhstan has achieved, and also with international events such as the war in Ukraine, which has pushed people further away from Russia and the Russian government, especially. So this but at the same time, though, Putin visited Kazakhstan these days for an official visit. We see that there's many high-level meetings between them, and we also see that there's a translation of legislation, right? That may first be implemented in Russia and then be implemented in Kazakhstan. This legislation, unsurprisingly, is repressive towards media, towards human rights, towards other civil rights in general. So this to us kind of pushes us to go against this tide and try to really bring to surface the issues that have been essentially allowing this repression of the media. And so we're trying to uncover these processes. We're trying to highlight who the main interest groups are behind this legislation, these changes, the pressure we suffer. On the other hand, in Kazakhstan, we're also very dependent on China for commercial reasons. And that also has an effect on the ability to report on certain things, because the Chinese government and Chinese companies really are very secretive and not really used to interact with media. So for us, it's very difficult to try to understand what they're trying to do in Kazakhstan, and the population at the same time asks us to clarify this. Another thing that is important is that we don't just want to be what other media locally are doing, for example, in the English language, about Kazakhstan. So a lot of other media are just basically business slash government mouthpieces, and they just report press releases, and they report things that happen at the macro level without any commentary, without any specific analysis. The EU famously says it's the most important trading partner of Kazakhstan, and yet there's very little interest. There's no media representation from Europe in Kazakhstan. There's AFP that has an office, one-man office. There's a couple of international news agencies such as Reuters and Bloomberg, but mostly with local correspondents. So we don't have the interest is there on paper, but it's not there in practice. And while Europe, the European Union, European partners, the US, they all come here and put pressure on the governments to change something in terms of democratic transition, we are there kind of tracking the progress. It's a condition in which we are really trying to find a way to be heard, because we feel like we are kind of at the border, at the brink of repression on a daily basis, and this could essentially mean that without Vlast, unfortunately, there will be significantly less opportunities to learn about Kazakhstan from a truthful standpoint and from a ethically sourced standpoint again. And this is to us is very important, because that's our it creates also a kind of a big responsibility, I must say. The newsroom tour should include this kind of psychological burden as well on us, because we would be much happier to be in competition with dozens of other independent newspapers. We would be very happy, and we've done a lot of collaborations in the past with independent media that have come up and then disappeared. But we've survived. We've survived thanks to, again, like Slava was saying, to the donors, to the readers. But it is an important mission that we have to talk about Kazakhstan in a way that is not filtered through the propaganda or the black PR lenses that other media use in Kazakhstan.
Yeah. So yeah, we wanted to kind of finalize this presentation with the last question, and then maybe go to the Q&A. Slava will tell you a little bit about our future. Where do we strive to be, and we can finish our presentation and do a Q&A.
This is the toughest. He decided to do this to me, and I have no idea why. I am always kind, and good. And you can obviously imagine that our publisher is not, because I have no idea how to respond on the question about future. You know, when you are working in tough conditions, when you are doing a journalism in tough conditions, it's always a big question of what can you do, because you can face a lot of challenges, and my colleagues already told you about these challenges, and I beat a bit. And I did a bit. It also can include some very, like big, big things that can be on your way. You know, we need to tell you about our colleagues in in both Kazakhstan and in Kyrgyzstan and in Tajikistan and in all these Central Asian countries that was arrested in the previous couple of years because of their work, because of what they did. And it's journalists who worked as investigative reporters. It's journalists who did some very good job investigating their government's actions and wrongdoings, and they've been arrested and they've been sentenced in some cases for several years in prison. And this is what you can also face as a journalist in Central Asia right now. We decided several years ago, when we faced like financial crisis inside our media, we decided that we will work until it will be possible. And it also means that we have enough, we have enough people who are ready to work. We have enough resources to do this job. We have enough hope to still be journalists in Kazakhstan. And that's why we do not have a very concrete plans. If we are talking about like 2028 and covering of something that will happen this year. And it will be an important year for Kazakhstan because it will be some elections in this period. Because we are not sure that Kazakh government will not decided to go against all independent media that will be still in the country that year. But at the same time, we are really hopeful because of the new generation of Kazakhs, doing something amazing in very different ways, and I'm talking about not only journalists, but also artists and about business, like young business people and all that. So we have a lot of hopes, and we definitely have some very concrete plans how we can go there, but we still do not have a very clear view of what can be a future, not only of Vlast, but of independent media in Kazakhstan, unfortunately. But it is what it is. Thank you, and we've tried to be like very quick, but it was not possible. Yeah, because it's kind of a tough, like it's challenging to tell you a lot about country and your media that you are doing for several years. So, but we will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, each of you, for really bringing an important conversation to the table. And of course, we at IPI are more than happy to, surface your experience and as much of your work as is possible. And I hope to find ways to collaborate in the future.